Okay, I've had a couple of you ask questions about the fee expense or how to kind of figure out the cost. And what you have to do is really look at the assets that you're putting into your portfolio that you're creating and what the specific costs are for each of those. So what I've done is just given a couple examples of how you can calculate it by looking at three different funds. So VOO is a Vanguard fund that invests in the S&P 500. It's an exchange traded fund or an index fund. And if you come over here, you can see the expense ratio of 0.03%. And I want to compare that to the Russell 3000 exchange traded fund or index fund from Vanguard, VTHR, which has an expense ratio of 0.10. And then I just looked up, and again, these are exchange traded funds and index funds. They are not actively managed, they're passively managed. They're just trying to meet that index, the Russell 3000 or the S&P 500. And compare that to an actively managed mutual fund here, and I looked up American Growth Fund Series. I just Googled the most expensive mutual funds, and this is on a list that I found. So if you look at what it's invested in and holdings are in, you're going to see, a lot of the same familiar names and companies. All right, Apple and Microsoft and Intel and Facebook, AT&T, Alphabet, which is Google, Amazon, Home Depot, Starbucks. Okay, these are the same companies that you're having access to when you invest in with the S&P 500 that you're getting. The difference is this fund is actively managed by a professional who's trying to beat the market. But its expense ratio, and if you come up here and look, so I looked at the American Growth Fund Series, AMRAX, expense ratio of 6.38%, but a total annual cost of 9.86%. So when you compare these three, I want to show you what that would, how we look and how we calculate these and how you can do it. So wherever you get your list, find the expense ratio for the funds that you're using, and they'll be clearly marked on the specific fund that you use. And so let's just take an example. If we're going to invest $1,000, and remember you're investing $400 a month, so however you want to show as an example, maybe you want to do a cost per year. So you could take your whatever you're putting into stock or into these assets per year. Maybe you figure out the cost on that specific and break it down per year what that's going to cost. Now, how expense ratios kind of work with index funds, how do I want to explain it? You're not going to see like, all right, here's a fee, and that's going to be listed on a piece of paperwork that they send you, or this is how much you invested, this is your gains, this is your fees. And they don't really work like that. It's just kind of taken off the top before the capital gains or the dividends are paid out to investors. But the expense ratio gives you an idea of how much you are contributing to that expense ratio based on how much you are investing. So I'll just use $1,000 because the math is pretty simple. Now to do this, remember we got to multiply this by, when we're doing this at decimals, we got to slide 2 spots to the right. So we'll multiply this one by 0.0986, this by 0.0003, and this one times 0.0010. So if we take our $1,000 and we get an idea of what this fund is costing us per $1,000 of account value. So if I do my first one, and that's behind my face there, I'll find a better way to. So let's just do the first one. We'll do the VOO, and we take that times 0.1003. For every $1,000 invested, it's going to end up costing you about 30 cents. Okay, now you compare that to the AMRAX above, and you take that times 0.0986, and that's going to end up costing about $98 for that actively managed. So you look at how much better this one is going to have to perform in comparison in order to make up that difference alone. That's very significant. And again, this is the most expensive one out there that I could find. But there are others that are having the expense ratios of, even if it was 1.5%, 2%, you're looking at $20 versus 30 cents. And you come down here to the other one, which is 0.10. And you take that times 0.001, okay, costing you $1 for every $1,000 invested. So these index funds are a very, very low cost way to get access to the market compared to an actively managed mutual fund. So how you would calculate that is just find your expense ratios and multiply how much you invest by whatever that ratio is, and that gives you an idea per dollar amount. If you want to use 1,000, you want to take it times the total that you invested. Just make sure you're taking it and you're moving that decimal place 2 spots to the left, so you have an accurate number. I hope that helps.